Okay, so there's a fight going on right now about whether Britain should be drilling for more oil. One side says it's madness, we should be getting off fossil fuels. And the other, which now reportedly includes Andy Burnham's new government, says that's exactly why our bills are so high. And in a few weeks, his government has to make the call, because sitting off Shetland, near Aberdeen, is Rosebank, the biggest undeveloped oil field in British waters. But here's the thing.
Tens of thousands of British jobs disintegrating and increasing energy bills for the British people.
The people who want to drill, and the people who don't.
So Rosebank won't lower our bills.
Neither of them are really wrong. They're just arguing about the wrong question. Because Britain taxes North Sea oil profits at 78%. Norway also taxes at the same rate. Yet this year, they'll make 10 times more money from their half than we'll make from ours. Same sea, same tax rate, 10 times the money. So where does it all go? Because the money from the North Sea really only lands in one of three places. Back to us through lower bills, into the Treasury, or out of the country altogether. So let's start with your bills, because that's the version of the argument we hear the most. Drill more of our own oil, import less of everyone else's, and we're not at the mercy of whatever's happening in the Gulf. And that's not a stupid argument, and it's why most people instinctively back drilling. But before we can test it, you need to know what we're actually drilling. So Rosebank holds somewhere between 300 and 500 million barrels, the single biggest untapped field left in British waters. And the argument is that a nice big new field on our side of the line means cheaper energy. Except there are two problems with that, and the second one kills it. The first is that oil from Britain's waters isn't really Britain's. It's not like it gets piped to us at mates' rates. It gets priced and sold on the global market, and if we want to buy it, we have to pay the same price as everybody else. One of Equinor's bosses, that's the company that'll be operating Rosebank, has said outright that if the UK wants the oil, it has to buy it on the open market like anyone else. But that's not even the main issue. Rosebank is around 90% oil, and household energy prices in Britain are driven overwhelmingly by natural gas. That's just how the UK energy market works. The price of electricity is set by the most expensive power station needed to keep the lights on. And that's almost always a gas plant, which means even if you buy the whole energy security argument, even if you think that the oil we drill will somehow be ours, the field is producing the wrong thing. It's a bit like saying that your gas bill will fall because someone's opened a coal mine. So the idea that Rosebank by itself is going to meaningfully reduce Britain's energy bills does not stand up. So if cheaper bills aren't really the prize, where's the benefit supposed to come from? Well, the other popular answer is tax revenue. And this is where most people think the money goes, because the tax rate is a whopping 78%. So that's corporation tax, plus an extra charge for oil and gas, plus the windfall tax, the one that was bought in back in 2022 when energy prices went through the roof. And all in, it's more than 3 times what a normal business pays. So surely the Treasury cleans up. Well, across the entire North Sea, and I want you to bear in mind that the government spends over £1 trillion a year, that rate raised just 4.4 billion last year. That's less than what we spend on the state pension every single week. And it used to be more. Back in 2008, when Gordon Brown was in charge, the North Sea brought in £10.6 billion. But since then, reserves have declined and costs have gone up. So the tax is diminishing. And interestingly, I found that in 2015, the North Sea didn't just bring in less money, it actually cost the taxpayer 24 million. So for the first time since records began back in 1968, the government actually paid the oil industry. And that's all thanks to something called cleanup. So when an oil field runs dry, someone has to shut it all down safely, plug the wells, take the platforms apart, basically tidy up after themselves. And it costs an absolute fortune. But the oil companies don't pay the bill. They claim the cleanup against the tax they paid years earlier when the field was making money hand over fist. So HMRC doesn't just collect less, some years it writes a check. And in 2019, Shell paid no tax at all on its North Sea oil. Instead, the government sent them a refund of £94 million. And for cleaning up one single field, Brent, Shell has claimed back over £500 million. In fairness, Brent paid over 20 billion into the Treasury before it shut. And across its whole life, the North Sea has paid Britain something like $350 billion. That's motorways, that's hospitals, schools, and those refunds are just the back end of a deal that was genuinely brilliant for Britain at the front end. So the problem isn't that the deals were bad, it's that the good times are over, and we're now left with oil fields that cost a fortune to run. It now now costs almost £20 to get a single barrel out of the ground. A barrel sells for around 50. So the margins that were once enormous are getting thinner every year. And a brand new field like Rosebank is a different kind of expensive. Deep water off Shetland, everything built from scratch. Billions of pounds will be needed before the first drop even comes out. Which is why, when Chevron found it back in 2004, they ran the numbers and walked away. They said the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. So why would anyone want to drill it now? Well, two things. Oil got more expensive and the tax deal got a lot better because 78% works both ways. Yes, whoever drills will have to pay 78 on their profits, but every pound they spend building the field, they can knock off their tax bill at 78p in the pound. And by the time the profits turn up, which will likely be after 2030, that windfall tax is due to expire. And under the current rules, the rate drops to 40%. So get this, they write off the building costs now at 78 and they pay tax on the profits later at 40. So the taxpayer effectively carries most of the cost of digging, or drilling, I should say, and then takes the smaller share of what it earns. We're not the owners here. We're just the mugs funding somebody else's business and settling for a tip. So unfortunately, it's not going to lower our bills, and it sure won't fill the Treasury, so there's only one place for the money to go. Since 1971, the British government in today's money has taken about $470 billion out of its half of the North Sea. Norway has taken just under 1.2 trillion. Now, the obvious explanation could be that Norway had more oil in their half, but they didn't. We've actually pulled 42.8 billion barrels out of the North Sea. They've pulled 40 billion. So if we've drilled more, why in the name of Erling Haaland are we getting so ripped off? Well, there are three reasons. The first is pure bad luck. Britain sold most of its oil when the price was rubbish. 65% went out the door when crude was under $50, and on average, we sold at $47 a barrel. They got 57. The second is geology. Norway's oil came in a few giant fields. Britain's was scattered across loads of smaller ones, and a giant field is much cheaper to run. So cheaper oil means more profit, and more profit means more tax. And the third one is the most important, because Norway didn't just tax the oil companies. They were one. Remember Equinor, the company operating Rosebank? The Norwegian state owns 67% of it. It's their national oil company.
Value perspective is, of course, creating 900 billion Norwegian kroner to the Norwegian state alone.
So picture what happens when a Norwegian field makes £100 million. The government takes 78% in tax, then turns round and takes a chunk of the remaining 22% on top. Now, the exact tax rates have changed over the years, not just for Norway, but for the UK as well. But eventually, Norway built one simple rule. The oil money gets invested and the pot itself never gets touched. So for 30 years, it just sat there, growing. Oil money going in one end, the stock market compounding it at the other. And that's the bit that actually matters. Whether you're a country or you're a person, Norway didn't get rich because it had oil. It got rich because it didn't leave the money sitting there doing nothing. It put it somewhere that paid and let time do the rest. And most people in the UK have got their savings deposited in accounts that aren't earning market leading rates. And that's the whole reason I built depositscout.com. You can compare savings accounts right across the UK market, including the one you have now, so you can see how it compares and find a better alternative. And whether you want instant access or an ISA, or perhaps you're looking to put your money away in a fixed rate, we display all account types. We also track their rate history, so you can see if a provider tends to move. Moneybox, for instance, has bounced between 4 and 4.75% over the last year, so you can see the whole picture before you commit. You can also set up alerts, so you'll be notified of rate changes, including top rates, a weekly roundup, and if you're interested in bank switch offers, we can also alert you on those. I'll put a link for depositscout.com in the description box. It's a free website that I built, so if you'd like to support the channel, please do check it out. So Norway had the benefit of compounding across many years, and Britain came so close to having the same thing. It was called the British National Oil Corporation.
The Brent Delta, 1979.
Set up in 1975, 4 years after Norway had the same idea. A state-owned company with stakes in British oil fields, collecting money for the public.
These men and their machines have made us self-sufficient in oil for the first time ever.
What a brilliant idea. But then Margaret Thatcher sold it, piece by piece, all through the early 80s. Brit Oil, Enterprise Oil, and some of it went so cheap that even then, barely anyone wanted to buy it. All in, we got about £1 billion. In today's money, a bit over 5 billion. And I know that sounds like a fortune. £5 billion, that's a serious price until you realise what it actually was. This was Britain's entire stake in the North Sea, the single greatest energy windfall in our history. Decades of oil, gone. We didn't just undersell it, we gave it away. And the worst part, somebody tried to stop us. Back in 1980, the government's own advisors put it in writing. Sell this now, they said, and yes, the books will look better this year, but we'll pay for it for decades. Oil, they warned, was only going to get more valuable. And obviously they were completely right. Yet they were completely ignored. Politicians chose one good year of books for 40 years of income.
We're very happy that we leave the United Kingdom in a very, very much better state.
Now, before we all get too angry, let me argue the other side for a moment, because honestly, I don't know if Britain could have pulled off what Norway did. So it's worth knowing what else we were up to in 1975, the year we set up our national oil company. Britain's just nationalised British Leyland, the great hope of car manufacturing. The company that was going to take on the world with the Mini, the Jaguar, the Land Rover, proper cars, symbols of the nation. And then we ran it into the ground. Strikes, breakdowns, doors that fell off in car parks.
And he's brought a piece of cheese. James, we're trying to prove that British Leyland occasionally made good cars.
You're not helping our case here.
Billions of pounds poured in, and a decade later, we gave up and sold the wreckage. This is the same Britain that we're imagining would calmly run an oil empire for 40 years. Then there's the timing. To buy Britain's oil, the rest of the world needed pounds, so suddenly everyone wanted them and the pound shot up in value, which I know may sound like good news, but it's not, because an expensive pound makes everything else Britain sells abroad more expensive too. So our cars, our steel, our machinery, and right at that moment, those industries were already on their knees.
Between the 1960s and the 1980s, British workers embarked on one of the country's most intense periods of strike action.
Now, Norway dodged this with a clever rule. Every penny, or krona, in the fund had to be invested overseas, which quietly held their currency down. For us to copy that, we'd have been shipping billions out of the country in the middle of a recession, so try selling that to the 10 o'clock news in 1981. And it wasn't even a sure thing for Norway. They spent billions through the mid-80s with nothing to show for it, and it was a genuine gamble with public money. It just happened to pay off. So some of Britain's bad fortune was down to the hand we were dealt, the timing, the geology, plain bad luck. But the other half was a choice. Decisions made in Whitehall by politicians who grabbed the money up front and threw away an income that would still be paying us today. So that's where the old money went. Now look at where the new money's going, because Britain's contemplating drilling the North Sea again. And the question the whole fight skips straight past is a simple one. Who will actually get paid? Definitely not you and me, unless you work on one of the rigs. The oil sells at the world price and our bills are set by gas, so it's not landing in pockets. Not really the Treasury either, £4.4 billion a year and falling. And that's the entire North Sea. And coincidentally, roughly the same amount we spent just planning for Brexit. It's important to mention the supply chain, because that's real. Azure, the company that owns a majority stake in Rosebank, reckons combined with another field, Jackdaw, they're worth $10.8 billion in investment. They also claim they could generate nearly £29 billion for the UK economy and thousands of jobs across their lifespan. That's food on the table for many families in Aberdeen and Shetland, which genuinely matters. But who really profits? Because let's be honest, it's not the people of Aberdeen. Well, Azure is half owned by Shell and half owned by Equinor, which the Norwegian government owns 67% of. So a share of the profit from Britain's biggest new oil field goes straight to Norway. And the part I find most unsettling, in 2024, Equinor paid over $20 billion in tax worldwide. In Britain, on nearly $2 billion in UK revenue, they paid just $6 million. And thanks to all the money they've spent building the fields, they're carrying a tax credit of nearly $500 million. That's money they can knock off future UK tax bills. So the taxman isn't collecting from them, he's effectively in their debt. So when the consultation closes on the 17th of August and someone tells you that drilling Rosebank will make Britain richer, well, they're only half right. It'll make someone richer, just not us.